Earlier, you started to touch on patients and sites. And I just want to come back to that for a minute. I mentioned earlier some of those hot topics that I see in the clinical space, and patient centricity is still one of those. I think anything I write about how companies are making trials better for patients, they get a lot of views, and companies, I think, like to know what others are doing. And I hear a lot more companies nowadays talking about being a sponsor of choice and how can we be a better partner for our CROs and the sites that we work with. So while EDC, I think, poses many great benefits to pharma companies, I see, and I think you mentioned this earlier, they do have the potential to create an increased burden for patients and especially the sites that have to use all of these new and evolving technologies. Can you discuss how sponsor companies should be handling that? How can they be more thoughtful of sites and patients when they're implementing these new technologies or evolving technologies?
That's a loaded question, Ed. I almost want to ask you that question. So, patient-centric, you're absolutely right. A few years ago, I was at a Scope conference when they were still in Miami, and someone was presenting up there, and it was a patient-centric session, and asked the question to the audience, how many of you have spoken to a patient? And not one hand went up. So it's like, how can you claim to be patient-centric? That has changed a lot today. You now have patient advocacy groups working with pharma. They're getting collaborative with the protocols, understanding the burden of the patient. I once read a protocol where the first visit was a 9-hour clinic visit. It's like, who's going to do this, right? And so, so I do think there's a lot more thought going on right from the beginning of the protocol, right through to how the trials are conducted, that are involving patients more than ever. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think, when a patient participates in a clinical trial, in my mind, they're making a huge sacrifice. They're giving a piece of their body and time for the greater good. Now, I know there's a lot of people who do this because they're really sick, but that's not in every case. And to me, it's service, and I think that we don't treat them that way. I don't think society treats clinical trial participants that way, and I'm not sure if pharma, although I think they're starting to, does the same thing. So what do I mean by that? I know it's been a while since any of us have been on airplanes, but they always let the military board first. Why can't they have clinical trial participants be a group of heroes that get to board an airplane first? Why isn't society more boastful and thankful to the clinical trial participants? And so I think if we could raise that, as this is a type of service, it's not for everyone, I think that could help in terms of the way the patients feel about participating. And they'll be, rather than hide in the corner because I'm in a clinical trial, they could talk about being in a clinical trial. I also think that pharma has a responsibility to let the patients know what happened to the drug in the trial that they were on. That's getting better. Before, you never knew anything. The trial ended and you never found out anything. But I do think that it's starting to get to the point where the pharma companies are now letting the trial participants know what happened and keeping them informed as to, here's what your piece did to help, and even if the drug doesn't go through, you helped us figure out that it wasn't the right drug. You helped us do the following. And so I think the pharma could really do a good job with that. But I do think it's changing a lot. I think that people in the industry have realized that the patients are the customer, right? I mean, they're not paying the money, but they really are the customer. Right. And the site-patient relationship is very important, the doctor-patient relationship. And their experience is going to drive your ability to process your pipelines. So I think it's changing.